Good morning, friends. This early morning session is dedicated to class 12, and we are continuing the poem Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. And now we are in paragraph 4. As before, I told that the poet Pablo Neruda has been advocating the need of peace throughout the poem. His intention is to ask us to have a halt from all the activities. He just urges us that we should count up to 12, indicating that this 12-hour time we should keep quiet and we should keep halt as long as possible so as to get a moment of silence, which will be a complete, which will be an exotic moment, which will be an unusual but exotic moment, and this silence would provide us time to go for introspection. This this will be a miraculous moment for all of us to be free from any kind of sound or any kind of activity, running of machine or noise, and that will not only protect the atmosphere, the environment, but it will also provide us opportunity to go for better bonding with humanity and develop mutual understanding. Now in stanza 4, the poet says, those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivor, would put on clean clothes and walk along with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. The poet now talks about all those people who wage war of all kinds, war with poisonous gases, war with arms and ammunition, war with chemicals, war which brings death and destruction, war which pollute environment, war which leaves no survivors to celebrate victory. And he is asking them, or he is pleading them to stop doing any kind of war, and their clothes which have been stained with the blood of humanity, they should shed these clothes and put on new clothes and walk along with their brothers, just to show their solidarity with their fellow brothers, building brotherhood. The poet implies that the war torn world should be replaced by a war which is having an atmosphere of peace, brotherhood, tranquility, and harmony. That the poet is now imagining that the war the man has been always waging against humanity and environment should stop forever. He is talking about all those wars in which human beings use chemicals and poisonous gases. They bring death and destruction, they cause damage to environment, they shed blood of humanity. They should stop all kinds of war against humanity and environment, and they should remove their blood stained clothes and put on new clothes and walk along with their fellow brothers, to show their solidarity with humanity, and should always, provide an atmosphere of peace, tranquility, mutual understanding, and brotherhood. That is what he says in stanza 4. Now, stanza 5, he says, what I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. The poet, while advocating the need of peace, throughout the poem Keeping Quiet, the poet Pablo Neruda is trying to advocate the need for peace. But he, at the same time, he asks us and makes a clarification that while we are advocating the need of peace, we should not be confused with the term total inactivity. He's never going to advocate total inactivity, which is also called death. He says that he means to have no association with death. It does not mean by stopping all our activity for some time or for a longer time does not mean total inactivity or death. He said that he never means to show any association with death. Rather, he is advocating the need of peace, which will provide opportunity to go for introspection and develop better understanding between man and man. Now in stanza 6, he says, if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and if one could do nothing for some time, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt with this sadness, of never understanding ourselves, of threatening ourselves with death. The poet now further advises us that people should stop being self centered and selfish. For one moment, they should think about the world around and not about themselves. The poet is now making an appeal to all the people over the world not to be selfish and self centered and single minded. Rather, they should develop a broader understanding, and that will really, if they stop all their activity for some time and moving their hands and using all the machines, certainly they will have time to think about the world. This huge silence will arise from that moment, will only serve to help the people. It will help them introspect and overcome their sadness of failing to understand themselves. This huge silence that the poet is advocating about will certainly arise from the moment, and that will only serve to help the people. It will help them introspect and overcome their sadness and failing to understand each other. This huge silence will certainly help us, go for an introspection, and will also provide an opportunity to understand each other. And that is what the poet is appealing for. This, this will also help us get rid of their sadness and doom that is really troubling them, and that will also provide them an opportunity to understand better. That will be a mutual understanding that will develop from that. Perhaps the earth can teach us, when everything seems dead, latter proves to be alive. Now I will come up to 12. I will count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. The poet is saying that the earth is an example which teaches us many things. That when everything is at halt, the earth is always alive, and it is performing certain hidden activities which we are not observing. For example, when everything on the earth is at a halt, the earth is still, in action, because the dormant seeds lying under the earth, grow into bigger plants. They come out with a huge flowering plants. These trees which come out from these dormant seeds lying in the, earth dead, this is an example that we should learn from the earth, and the earth can really enlighten us and guide us in this process of keeping quiet. He wants us to observe that there is some activity that is going on inside the earth even when the entire world is at halt, and that activity is that the dormant seeds lying under earth come out with huge flowering plants. And that is an example that when everything is halt, earth never goes dead, it is always alive, and it enlightens us to understand that even when we are not performing manual work or machine work, there are certain activities going on in our mind and around us which will really provide us an opportunity to understand ourselves better. One or two questions that we will discuss which are very important for. Question number one, which has come in board exam, that what will possibly be the effect of keeping quiet? Keeping quiet will help us go for an introspection of our behavior on, destructive action. Human being has always been performing certain destructive activities. So keeping quiet will provide us an opportunity to go for a self exam. We will examine ourselves and our activities and our actions, like waging war against humanity and environment. Man has been always waging war against humanity and environment, causing huge damage to humanity. So keeping quiet will certainly provide him opportunity to look into his actions and try to understand the consequences of these actions. Then only the people will, the humanity will be protected. So keeping quiet will provide us an opportunity or a better idea of understanding the consequences of our actions, because unless and until we understand the worst consequences of what we are doing, what damage we are doing to humanity and environment, we will not be able to correct our behavior, and thus This will change our attitude. So that is the need of the hour. The huge silence, keeping quiet, or the huge silence will provide us an opportunity to go for an introspection of our behavior, and also provide an opportunity to change our attitude towards the world in general and to the individuals in particular. And then the last question of the day, question number 2. Which images in the poem Keeping Quiet so that the poet condemns violence? The image of fishermen not, harming the whales in the sea. The poet says that for some moment the fishermen will stop harming the whales. They will not go for fishing. This is first image. And the second one, the people will stop waging war of all kinds, not using chemicals and poisonous gases. And that will, and the second image the poet is saying that the war which will serve no purpose because it will leave behind no one to celebrate the victory. Third one, the poet's refusal to have any association with, death. He says that no, I am not advocating about death. My association is not with death, things which are dead. I rather advocate life full of, enlightenment and knowledge, life which is to be lived. He said that life is meant to be lived, not to be, associated with death. So he advocates total silence for some time. At the same time, he wants it to make it clear that he doesn't want it to be any association with death. And therefore, the fourth image is the image of an exotic moment of silence, which certainly should not be confused with total inactivity. Rather, it should be the opportunity of looking into the pros and cons of what we are doing, and rather creating an atmosphere which will be associated with activity, because life is meant to be lived, not to be dead. So the images of fishermen harming the whales. So he said that no, there should be some opportunity, some time that the fishermen should stop harming the whales. That will save the environment. The people should stop using poisonous gases and arms against humanity, stop any kind of death and destruction. And then he also condemns violence of any kind. He says that the people should go for complete, moratorium to any kind of war. That is what he is advocating for. And this is the nutshell of this whole poem. The poet in a nutshell wants to emphasize that we, the human being, should never go against humanity. Green wars such as war with poisonous gases or war with fire are the kinds of war which leaves behind, and death and destruction. And therefore, the poet says that we should go for rejection of such war, because then only we will have time to correct our behavior and think about our brothers and develop the sense of brotherhood, tranquility, peace and prosperity on the earth. And that is what he is advocating of. Keeping quiet is rather an inspiration for all human beings to go for certain, exotic moment of silence, away from all machines and noises, and seek this moment of silence to have an introspection and meditation about what life should be about. The poet wishes that in this selected moment of silence, an exotic moment of silence, we should always try to introspect our behavior and mend our wrong ways to provide a better opportunity and develop mutual understanding, which will really be a great moment, a miraculous moment, and that will change the concept of the humanity and will provide us international brotherhood and cooperation and better understanding between man and man. This meditation, this silence, this opportunity of meditation and silence will be an exotic moment which will not only soothe our soul and clean our soul, but it will also provide us or instill a sense of hope, survival, and betterment of the humanity on the earth. This is what the poet is advocating about. So throughout this poem, the poet is advocating about peace and silence, tranquility, halt from activity, and the need of going for an introspection that will help us develop and will get rid of all sorts of violence, all sorts of impurities, all sort of bad behavior, and will certainly provide us opportunity to help ourselves go for an introspection and overcome the sadness that is responsible for our suffering and miseries of life, and that will really make us understand one another better and develop a global understanding on this earth. And that is what the poet is advocating about. Thank you. Have a nice day ahead.